уважаемые коллеги,
Dear colleagues, President Xi, President Batulga, Prime Minister Abe, Prime Minister Lee, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I would like to welcome participants of the 4th Eastern Economic Forum. We're happy to receive the heads of the leading states in Asia-Pacific region, heads of global corporations, renowned international experts in politics, economics, science, culture, and environment. This year, Forum has gathered guests from more than 60 countries, with representatives of more than 1,000 Russian and foreign companies. We value and cherish each and every partner, and first and foremost, I would like to wish you every success in promoting of business initiatives. I expect that meetings in Vladivostok will come to be a good opportunity to forge reliable business ties for fruitful cooperation in all regions of Russia, and especially, naturally, in the Far East, here. In order to develop the economics here in the Far East, that is the reason behind this forum. Development of the Far East is an absolute priority for us. I'd like to repeat that this is a consistent long-term policy. Our efforts are aimed to create here, in the dynamically growing Asia-Pacific region, a strong center for international cooperation and integration, business and investment activities, education, science, and culture. Creation of such a hub, first and foremost, is in the interest of citizens of Russia, people living in the Far East, and their welfare, in order for them to be capable to fully realize their potential. In that, we see a powerful resource to achieve those strategic goals that we have set for ourselves. That is, breakthrough development, strengthening competitive edge of the country, improving living standards of the citizens. We understand the complexity of challenges before us. We understand that there have been decades of demographic and social, economic and infrastructural issues in the Far East. They cannot be solved all at once. But we have to do it, and we will do it. Modern models of interacting with businesses, prioritized public approach to development of the Far East are already yielding result. This region is becoming an area of growth, lodestone for investment. I'm convinced that the Far East, in its new role as the driver of domestic economy, innovation and culture, in the coming years will only gain momentum. Thus, over the past 5 years, since 2013 till 2017, industrial production in the region has grown by almost 22%. This is significantly higher than average rate in Russia. Today, the region attracts more than a quarter of foreign direct investment in Russia. And 5 years ago, that stood at only around 2%. Through special mechanisms for development of the Far East, the territories of advanced development, the free port of Vladivostok alone, there have been more than 100 new enterprises launched, with more than 16,000 of modern jobs created in such sectors as construction materials production, transport infrastructure, machine engineering, tourism, mineral resources production, marine bioresources development, and agro-industrial complex. We see development, it is apparent. I'd like to say that here in the Far East, we see rapid growth of investment in agricultural projects. We need to support this trend, including by promoting engagement of unused lands and land plots, which are under different kinds of restrictions. Yesterday, I had a meeting with our colleagues from foreign countries, with investors, and they have great interest in such work. I mean, the competitive edge that I have just mentioned, including the agriculture. And therefore, I ask the government and the governors of the Russian regions to actively engage in this issue, to review the state of affairs in agricultural land use in each region. And of course, we have to broaden access of Far Eastern agri-produce to foreign markets, including Asia-Pacific. In this regard, we suggested our Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and other friends and partners whose business is actively investing in agro-industry in the Far East to work together on dismantling barriers in food trade and to find best solutions for a win-win situation. We understand it very well, what kind of significance is attached to phytosanitary control, and we have to work on that, especially since we are creating here in the Far East enterprises and territories transparent for common work. We actively engaging in cooperation investment ties with China. Today, Far East, with participation of Chinese investors, implements more than 30 projects with investments standing at about 200 billion rubles. We're committed to positive cooperation with Japanese partners. In the run-up to this event, with Prime Minister Abe, we have launched a plant producing car engines in Primorsky region. Preparedness for such concrete and fruitful joint work will always receive our support. There are good opportunities for promotion of infrastructural, energy, environmental projects with Mongolia, our long-standing and reliable partner. Companies from the Republic of Korea are operating successfully in Russia, and we see great promise for joint work with South Korean businesses, especially here in the Far Eastern regions. Naturally, I wanted to go back to the discussion of trilateral projects in infrastructure, energy, and other spheres, with participation of Russia, the Republic of Korea, and Democratic People's Republic of Korea. In order to promote such initiative, first and foremost, we need to normalize the situation around Korean Peninsula. On the whole, for sustainable development, we need to ensure stability, peace, and security in Asia-Pacific. It's important not to allow for the new conflicts to appear and for the chronic disputes to be solved through dialogue only. That approach, that constructive agenda that Russia has promoted and will continue to do so in all international platforms, in work with our partners in Shanghai Cooperation Organization, APEC, ASEAN, and other regional associations. I also wanted to add the following. I have already said that the world and global economy are coming up against new forms of protectionism today, with different kind of barriers which are increasing in the past times. Basic principles of trade, competition, mutual economic benefit are depreciated and, unfortunately, undermined. They are becoming hostages of ideological approaches and fleeting political situations. In that, we see a serious challenge for all of the global economy, especially for the dynamically growing Asia-Pacific and its leadership. We're convinced that in order for our region to continue to achieve high growth rates and to continue to remain a key participant of the global economy and trade, it should retain the spirit of economic freedom, to be the space of business initiative without sanctions, bans, and political bias. Inviting foreign partners to work jointly on the projects in the Far East, we're acting based on pragmatism, rational thinking, and mutual benefit. We want for the honest competition of investors to increase, for them to compete for the opportunity to implement their projects in the Far East, for the best business proposals to win, proposals that will bring high profit, which is the bottom line of any business. Take a look. In this region, we already have companies from Kazakhstan, India, Vietnam, Australia, New Zealand, and many other countries, very different in their interests, traditions, culture, political architecture, international commitments and priorities. But yet again, for all, and I would like to highlight it, for all entrepreneurs, we create equal conditions for successful and efficient work. It is in the spirit of development and openness we have decided on electronic visas for travel to the Far East. Right now, they are in place for citizens of 18 countries who can file all papers remotely in a simplified procedure. We will work to see the number of states whose citizens can receive electronic visas grow, including APEC economies, of course. Dear friends, I have already said that the scale of tasks in front of us requires systemic work in the decades ahead. I believe that we need a national program for development of the Far East of Russia from 2025 looking into 2035. government will be given instructions to draft this document and to do that in close contact with Far Eastern regions, citizens, businesses, civil societies, and business associations. Considering the significance of such national program, it will be endorsed by the presidential decree. Thank you. Program should unite, integrate measures of our national projects and state programs. Long-term sectoral plans of ministries and agencies and infrastructural companies, strategies of development of all Far Eastern regions. Such a national program indeed should contain specific, concrete, measurable deliverables. And this is the job for the colleagues from the government and the regions. But what I wanted to say already now, tasks that we must set for ourselves can only be ambitious, breakthrough, and proactive. Otherwise, we should not do that at all. We should strive for the growth rate of the Russian Far East to be higher than the average global. But we understand that this is a difficult task. Our neighbors in the Asia-Pacific, they're showing good growth rates. That means that it's about 6% annual GDP, and this is the goal for us in the Far East. We have strong competition, and the more efficient our work should be. First and foremost, we need that to drastically improve the quality of life of our citizens. For the nearest future, so that more people would come out here and move here to the Far East than more people than are leaving. We need to have more people to work here, to build their houses, to start families and have children here in the Far East. What key spheres must be foreseen in the national program for Far East development? Number one, and the most important, we need to ensure great proactive dynamics in such sensitive spheres for people, such as high-quality housing and utilities, transport accessibility, connectivity of the Far East with the rest of Russia, healthcare, culture, sports opportunities. We should offer special measures for demographic development and support for families. Number two, future of the Far East is not only the traditional spheres that we do have to bring to the new level, but that is primarily modern education, science, international cooperation in spheres that define trends of global progress. We have gathered here on Ruski Island, on the platform of Far East Federal University. We intend to create here a major world-level scientific and educational center, including building a technopark, as well as a mega science research facility, which would allow to solve revolutionary new fundamental and applied tasks in pharmaceuticals, in material sciences, and other spheres. I believe it justified that our leading companies and corporations which implement their projects in the Far East, that is Rosneft, Gazprom, Rosatom, Roscosmos, and others, enterprises dealing with aircraft building and others, to set up here on Ruski Island their engineering divisions, research and development centers. I'm asking the government and the leadership of the companies to see that as instruction to action. Today, new technologies are ahead of conventional norms of legal regulation and rules of certification. We want to take down these barriers. We want to create here in the Far East, so to speak, a space of the future, the realm of dreams and creativity. I'm instructing the government to work on the special status of Ruski Island. This should be such an environment where any research team or a group of enthusiasts could receive all necessary conditions to launch startups, to realize their ideas and innovational projects, so they could test cutting-edge developments whose practical and commercial use of which are still not described in the legislation, including in robotics, unmanned and sea transportation, in medicine and biotechnologies, in environmental studies. Besides, as part of our program of digital economy, I suggest to create on Ruski Island the Center for Digital Development in such spheres as software development, storage technologies, and transmission of so-called big data and cybersecurity. 2 months ago, here in Far Eastern Federal University, as a part of our National Technological Initiative, there has been held a one-of-a-kind innovational training course for digital technologies. The whole process, starting with student selection up to creation of individual educational paths was built using technologies of artificial intelligence. Today, considering this experience, Far Eastern Federal University introduced a permanent program to train specialists and managers in digital economy. We will spread this practice to other regions and universities of our country. Naturally, all of the Far East should become a platform for introducing breakthrough digital solutions in transportation and utilities, education and healthcare, in public services. Already now, here, you can receive the most important services for businesses online. These are construction permits and permits to commission enterprises in territories of advanced development, registration of land plots, and issuance of licenses. Number 3, I'm convinced that Far East is capable and should be a powerful economic and industrial center with great export potential. And for that, we cannot do without entrepreneurial spirit and growth of SMEs. Far East should have competitive edge in business climate compared to other regions of Russia, as well as to the neighboring countries. In order to be attractive for our neighbors, and the Russian part of this audience understands that very well, we have to be one step ahead. Already this year, 4 out of 9 Far Eastern regions were ranked in top 40 of national ranking on quality of investment climate. This is good dynamic, but still we have a wealth of things to do. As for federal support, here there is already a number of additional decisions in place. Investors of territory of advanced development and the free port of Vladivostok can apply and receive up to the end of 2025 a 10-year relief on insurance payments. I would like to highlight that for people who are doing into businesses for 10 years ahead. They're already covered by the grandfather clause, so investors have received guarantees of unchanged conditions for the implementation of their projects. In order to support entrepreneurs, both Russian and foreign, to ensure their beneficial financing, we intend to top up Far East Development Fund already this year by 8.2 billion rubles. Also, I'm asking the government to define capitalization top-up of the fund on the coming 3 years. Number 4, Far East should fully tap into its logistical potential. Large-scale overhaul of Baikal-Amur and Trans-Siberian Railroad, development of Far Eastern ports and the Northern Sea Route will drastically improve transport connectivity of Asia-Pacific and Europe. In the coming future, we need to modernize border crossings in the Far East to make it easier for the citizens and businesses to interact with customs, supervision, border, and other services which are working on the borders. I'd like to remind you that in the coming 6 years, volume of transit container shipments via railroad should increase by 4 times, and travel time from the Far East to the western border of Russia to be cut down to 7 days. Cargo flow through the Northern Sea Route should increase by up to 80 million tons per year. I'd like to say that all this are calculated and accomplishable plans, ever more so since there is great interest of businesses to such infrastructure. It's apparent. Northern Sea Route, the shortest maritime passage between the Far East and Europe, right now actually is navigated by the first ice-class container vessel Arctic 4. This voyage between Vladivostok and St. Petersburg, calling at Korean Busan and German Bremerhaven, without an exaggeration, is opening a new page in the history of trade navigation. It confirms safety, efficiency, and relevance of the Russian Arctic, of the whole Northern Sea Route as an international corridor. We invite interested partners to explore this promising transport artery. And we already know that there is such an interest coming from our partners. One more thing. It is apparent that revenue and profit from transit corridors should not be transiting right through the Far Eastern regions, passing by the interests of people who live here. Modern transport and export infrastructure should be the backbone for creating in the Far East high-quality jobs, new production sites and enterprises producing goods with high added value, including, and maybe first and foremost, export-oriented production. This is extremely important. It's important for us to create transport corridors and for them to be export-oriented, but most important thing is to develop our economy and our production. Main users of Far Eastern transport corridors and ports are, as a rule, large coal and energy companies. I suggest to think how to incentivize these Russian exporters to direct part of their income into efficient economic and social projects in the Far East. Dear friends and colleagues, Russia, our Far East, are of course open to strengthening business ties. We're convinced that mutual benefit here is apparent, and we're talking not only about profit from financial reports, joint projects in industry and science, education and culture, infrastructure and energy bring together countries and nations. They allow to understand each other better, to learn more about each other, to strengthen our common domain, peace, good neighborliness, and trust in dynamic and complex 21st century. And so together, by joining efforts and capabilities to build the future. I would like to wish you every success and prosperity unto you. Thank you very much to this forum.
Vladimir Vladimirovich, I would like to make a complaint about your representative in the Far East, Mr. Trutnev. Everybody's complaining when speaking to me. 10 years ago, we have done an interview in Taiga near Ussurisk. I became addicted to the Far East. I started coming here regularly. I came here on the day when the Far East Hectare program was launched. Mr. Trutnev offered me to buy a plot of land, and I asked him to advise a plot of land. And he's not doing it. What does this mean? I cannot use pool to do this kind of thing?
Why should you use connections when you can just follow the procedure and get the land? 122,000 people did that. They have already received the so-called Far Eastern Hectare. While people do agriculture here, as well as hotel and tourism businesses, recreational businesses. So this is a working program. It continues to develop. Of course, there are issues, especially it used to happen at the initial stages that had to do with governance and administrative measures, that had to do with allocation of plots that you could actually use for them to be not only on paper. But overall, we're fine-tuning the work. As you know, we have adopted a decision that not only the Far East would be involved in this hectare project so that people from other regions could also receive this land. We continue our work, and I'm positive that it will bring fruit to development.
Well, there is the rest of Russia besides the Far East, and there's a connection to People's Republic of China, which is the main guest at our forum. So I invite the President of People's Republic of China, Mr. Xi Jinping, to come to the lectern. President Putin, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues from different parts of the world, friends, it's a great pleasure for me to once again come to Vladivostok, 8 years after my previous trip. First of all, I would like to say sincere thank you to President Putin for the warm welcome. Thank you to my Russian friends for their hospitality. The Eastern Economic Forum has been launched by President Putin, and it has been held 3 times quite successfully. It has become a venue for discussion of cooperative issues of key importance. This time, in this forum, we have an unprecedented number of guests that came from different countries. I admire the scale of the forum, and I would like to congratulate President Putin and my Russian friends on this event. This is fresh wind from the east that brings life to everything. We have seen a lot of beautiful things after we came here. It impresses us a lot. Vladivostok looks differently. We see a lot of ships in the harbor. We see a beautiful bridge that flies over the bay and comes to the Ruski Island. This is telling us how rapidly this city is developing. The achievements of Vladivostok are the reflection of rapid development of the Russia's Far East in recent years. The theme of this forum is expansion of opportunities. The Far Eastern region opens up broad range of possibilities for new production, for development of cooperation. China has always been and is still a participant of development projects in eastern part of Russia. We have unique geographic benefits. China and Russia are biggest neighbors. We have solid political base. We are partners in comprehensive strategic cooperation. Chinese-Russian relations are at the all-time high level. We get strong support from the political powers, and this helps us to rebuild the industrial base in the east of Russia. This is a national strategy for Russia. We have good mechanisms that have been created by the Commission for Development of northeast of China and far east of Russia. There is a business council associated with this organization. Several leaders of Chinese and Russian regions are involved in this work. There are joint efforts. China has participated in projects in the Russian Far East, and they have been successful. In 2017, the trade turnover between China and Far Eastern Federal region has been in excess of $7 billion. China participates in more than 30 projects in priority development areas and in Freeport, Vladivostok. The overall volume is higher than $4 billion. China is the biggest partner and investor in Russia's Far East. China has already set up a regional development fund with a volume of 100 billion RMB, with the initial capital of 10 billion RMB. Together with Russian partners, we will maintain the operation of this fund so that big projects could become successful. This fund should become an effective vehicle in cooperation between China and Russia. A oil pipeline between Russia and China is built. A natural gas pipeline is being built. Railways and motorways are being built. We are coming close to the time when we will harvest the results of our cooperative projects in the Far East. In these years, we, together with President Putin, have announced the period of Chinese-Russian cooperation. This is opening up new opportunities for cooperation between our countries in the Far East. With the Russian side, we will make our contribution to development of infrastructure, energy, agriculture, tourism. We will mobilize small and medium-sized businesses, make sure there's a greater high-tech contribution to the economy, make sure that the share of added value products production is growing. We should learn from each other and make contribution to growth in China and in Russian Far East. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, in the new conditions, we should go together, hand in hand, and increase our cooperation in the interest of peace, stability, development in the region. I would like to share a few thoughts with you. First, we should strengthen trust for the benefit of peace and stability in the region. Currently, we see very complex changes in the political domain. There is a lot of protectionism. There is a lot of strength-built policy that we see around. In Asia, we account for 23% of global population and 19% of global GDP. Stable, consolidated Southeast Asia would be good for the entire world, and it would help to support multinational efforts to maintain fair world order, make it more rational. China is a part of Northeast Asia, and we stick to peaceful development course. We want to establish good, friendly relations with our neighbors. China acts in the spirit of respect and plays a constructive role in cooperative projects. We are involved in dialogue with different countries in the region. We take into account their wishes and concerns. We are prepared to work together with all parties. We want to increase trust in a search of effective way to solid peace and stability in Northeast Asia. We will make our contribution to this process. Secondly, we should strengthen cooperation for mutual benefit in Northeast Asia. This region has rich energy resources. It is a leading region in terms of high-tech research and development. This area has a lot of financial resources and a lot of talents. Every country in Northeast Asia has unique benefits and has unique features in economic development. Different countries complement each other. When the situation in the region is stabilizing and things are getting better, countries of the region can use these benefits to increase their cooperation in different domains. We should be more active, bringing together our development strategies, aligning them. President Putin and I have agreed that China and Russia are aligning their policies successfully. One Belt, One Road is connected to Eurasian Economic Union. We see tangible outcomes. Chinese side is prepared to align its strategy to all other countries to have better exchange of information, to coordinate our political efforts. We want to join efforts and identify the main direction of development. We need to make connectivity a priority. We need transnational infrastructure, which should simplify and enhance trade, improve markets' liquidity. It should help capital flow and technology flow. It should optimize use of resources. Together, we should build open regional economy and create an economic ring in Northeast Asia. We should work towards greater cooperation in different formats, regional and sub-regional. We have achieved good results in trilateral projects between China, Japan, and South Korea, also China, Russia, and Mongolia. China is open for international cooperation. Everything that contributes to stability, development, and mutual benefit in the region. We are willing to act with other countries to study opportunities associated with cooperation in different formats, including sub-regional formats, so that we can launch more projects that would benefit the people of the region. I count on Asian Bank's role in this, the Fund of the Silk Road. I hope that they will offer support to such projects. Thirdly, we should learn from each other, learn from other people's experience to strengthen friendship between people. North Asian countries have a lot of things in common. For a long time, we have been developing the friendship links. We have had a lot of very touching stories. For example, All-Russia Children's Center Ocean in Vladivostok has welcomed over 500 children from Benchuan province in China. Our children have spent time there. They have been taken very good care of in a very warm atmosphere. In their hearts, now they have a very special attitude to Russia. Amongst those children, there was one boy named Citizen Fan. He made a wish. He wanted to come back to Russia to study. He put a message in a bottle and threw it into the water. And an employee of the Ocean Center has found this bottle and read the message. So the wish came true. The boy is now studying in the Far Eastern Federal University, which is a good example of exchange programs between different peoples in the region. In the future, I suggest that we should use the existing base of contacts and do more to expand our cooperation in traditional areas, education, culture, youth exchanges. We should continue to learn from each other in order to preserve our historical and cultural heritage. We should protect intellectual property to create a good venue for cooperation between peoples of different countries, nations, and ages. Fourth, we should work for long-term future in order to make our development efforts comprehensive and long-term. There are several factors that play a role in Northeast Asia: unequal development, high rate of growth, multiple joint projects. Countries of the region should face the reality and work in a constructive fashion, developing long-term projects, coordinating and aligning their efforts. This way, we would be able to develop our economies in a balanced way, make better use of resources that nature has to offer. Together with the countries of the region, we're willing to look at new models of coordinated development in Northeast Asia. We want to enhance and increase a level of cooperation, speed it up, so that we can better manage the environment and make our economies lean and make our industries more effective and efficient. We want to face the environmental issues that we have in the region. President Putin, ladies and gentlemen, friends, we would like to use historic opportunities together with other countries of the region. We want to make our cooperation in the Far East more active. We want to develop cooperation in all of Northeast Asia. We want it to be multifaceted development. We want to do many more things together so that all peoples in the region would get better prospects and would be able to enjoy the outcomes of our cooperative projects. We would like to open up the potential of the Far East and of Northeast Asia. Thank you very much.
Уважаемый председатель Си, я, может быть,
President Xi, I remember the interview in Sochi. You let me ask you a personal question about your reading. Now, this was a very touching story with a message in a bottle. It makes me think about this. This could be just one episode. You have a reporter sitting next to you after we had that flight with Kim Chang-in to Singapore. Did you leave any messages for him on board that plane? I must say that indeed this was good that we have had that summit in Singapore. In the countries in Northeast Asia, we stick to that opinion. We approve that summit between leaders of the United States and DPRK. We stand for stability in the world and in Northeast Asia. Without peace, without stability, we cannot hope to have prosperity in the future. That summit is quite welcome. We try to help that process, and we want it to be successful. This could also be taken as a message.
From time to time, I will ask this kind of clarifying questions. And now we'll move on to a speech by the President of Mongolia. And there is something that I would like to explain. You may have heard this earlier in St. Petersburg. Mongolia is the only country in the world where the foreign ministry has a special department for neighboring countries, Russia in the north and China in the south. And at Ulaanbaatar, where they have the map of the former Mongolian Empire, and my Mongolian friends often make jokes. They say, we are happy with the way the outskirts of our empire are doing today. So we will now give the floor to the President of Mongolia.
Орос улманы ерөнхийлөгч иргэншсэн ноён Владимир Putin,
Mr. Putin, President of the Russian Federation, Mr. Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China, Mr. Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister of Japan, and Mr. Lee Nak-yong, Prime Minister of the Republic of Korea. Ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the President of the Russian Federation for inviting me to the Eastern Economic Forum once again. The annual Eastern Economic Forum is evolving as an important dialogue platform for defining the directions of further cooperation among the countries in Asia-Pacific. The scope of the forum and the level of its participants are broadening every year. Developing friendly and good neighborly relations, as well as promoting all-round cooperation with our neighboring countries, the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China, and engaging in regional political and economic integration are priority directions of Mongolia's foreign policy. I held bilateral and trilateral meetings with the heads of states of Russia and China in Qingdao in June this year and reaffirmed our aspiration to further deepen our cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's forum is being organized under the theme of the Far East expanding the range of possibilities. I see the theme as participant countries are seeking new opportunities to intensify both bilateral and multilateral cooperation. Russia's Far Eastern region is an important gateway, an opportunity for Mongolia to deepen collaboration with regional countries and engage in regional integration process. Mongolia plans to use the seaports of its neighbor to expand its transport capabilities. With this objective, the Parliament of Mongolia adopted the state policy on railway transportation in 2010. This policy is being implemented successfully. Concluding the intergovernmental agreement between the governments of Mongolia and the Russian Federation on terms for rail freight transit transportation in June this year was a big step forward. Moreover, Mongolia has signed important documents with China, including agreement on access to and from the sea and transit transport through China's territory by Mongolia, as well as the intergovernmental cooperation agreement between Mongolia and China on railway transit transportation. Conclusion of these agreements has unlocked broader possibilities for Mongolia to trade with Northeast Asian countries and others by transiting through our neighbors' territories and seaports. I would like to thank President Putin and President Xi Jinping for their support in signing the above-mentioned agreements enabling Mongolia to gain access to the sea and join international trade and economic integration. Mongolia is a country that enjoys excellent relations with its neighbors and countries in the region, and we have no single contentious issue nor dispute with any of them. Therefore, Mongolia has proposed the initiatives such as Ulaanbaatar Dialogue to promote dialogue and strengthen mutual understanding among the countries in the region. While we aim to further strengthen high-level political relations, we also strive to align our development policy with those of regional countries and jointly implement major projects. For instance, we are currently working together to implement the Mongolia-Russia-China Economic Corridor. During our meeting in Qingdao, I discussed with President Putin and President Xi Jinping the commencement of certain projects within the program. We are ready to cooperate on passing the planned natural gas pipeline from Russia to China through Mongolian territory. As I would like to thank President Putin for supporting Mongolia's proposal, I express my hope that President Xi Jinping would also support this initiative. We stand ready to create a favorable legal environment for the project. In order to further broaden cooperation with our major trade and investment partners and provide more favorable investment environment, Mongolia signed the Economic Partnership Agreement with Japan in 2016 and has concluded the joint feasibility study on signing similar agreement with the Republic of Korea. We're also discussing commencing the feasibility study for a free trade agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union. Ladies and gentlemen, Mongolia's economic downturn has been reversed and growth is stabilizing. GDP growth reached 5.3% in 2017 and 6.3% in the first half of 2018. We are steering to reduce the vulnerability of our economy's dependency on the mining sector. In an effort to diversify the economy, we are pursuing policies to increase the trade turnover with our main partners and to boost export of value-added and non-mining products. I wish to reaffirm from this podium that Mongolia will continue adhering to the policies of actively developing bilateral and multilateral trade and economic cooperation with regional countries. In order to thoroughly explore the possibility of developing an economically viable cooperation, I would like to make a concrete proposal. In recent years, countries including Russia, China, Japan, South Korea, and Mongolia, as well as the United Nations, have discussed the establishment of an energy regional supergrid and have individually conducted researches and calculations and held joint conferences. I call upon the urgent and prompt commencement of the Northeast Asian Supergrid project, which can share the load during the peak hours and will be a resource-efficient and optimal solution for supplying Northeast Asian countries with energy. As to the beginning of the supergrid, I am pleased to announce that Mongolia and China are starting a joint project for an energy complex and high-voltage transmission line. The complex will comprise of stations with an installed capacity of 5,350 megawatts from solar, wind, and coal sources. Moreover, a 1,500-kilometer-long high-voltage direct current will be constructed. Research and feasibility study of the complex are completed, and the construction work will commence shortly. Mongolia, as a country with vast territory, can help reduce loads during peak hours in Japan and Korea with its energy production from solar and wind sources by utilizing seasonal and time difference as well as backup energy sources. Use of renewable energy will certainly be welcomed by consumers in all countries. It is therefore necessary to establish an organization with appropriate involvement of Mongolia, Russia, China, Japan, South and North Korea, 6 countries that share responsibilities to successfully implement the Northeast Asia Supergrid project. The organization is to formulate a comprehensive policy by integrating all prior research works for the project and prepare relevant agreements and negotiations. We are ready to host and support this organization in Mongolia. In order to establish the organization urgently, we propose to launch a joint working group with involved parties promptly. We are of view that this grid project would integrate the energy networks of the Northeast Asian countries and thus become a first step towards establishing the Asian supergrid. We believe the Northeast Asian supergrid will open new opportunities for cooperation and development and contribute in confidence building among all countries in the region. I wish a great success to the forum. Thank you for your attention. Maybe we shouldn't wait for too long. Maybe we could respond to this initiative right away. Mr. Putin, Mr. Xi, this proposal was for Russia and China. What do you say? Well, we just discussed this proposal with my colleague, the President of Mongolia. We discussed this in our bilateral meeting. We are aware of this proposal. We're working on it. And actually, this is quite doable. This is quite feasible. We've been working in Mongolia for a long time. You know about transport infrastructure. Russia owns 50% of the Ulaanbaatar Railway. Partners on both sides have plans to develop infrastructure there. We've been working on this project with our Chinese and Mongolian partners, extending routes for delivering hydrocarbons through Mongolia. And there are some good proposals there that are worthy of our support. There are interesting proposals as far as power grid is concerned. What does China think about this? Who will pay for all this? This project looks promising, but who will pay for it? Governments or private companies? From the geographical viewpoint, Russia, China, and Mongolia should work together. This is what we do all the time. We have regular meetings between the leaders of these countries. We have a mechanism in place. Our bilateral contacts are also quite favorable. We had a meeting today with the president of Mongolia, and we discussed ways to improve our cooperation. Many problems inspire us. Many projects have been implemented. Some are being implemented. Others are making progress. This program that was mentioned here today, it's a tremendous program. And the most important thing right now is to do a feasibility study, to do necessary research, and then we can get started on this project. I can see the Prime Minister of Korea nodding, but let's follow the order that we have agreed. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, the floor is yours.
Mr. Brilev, thank you for your kind introduction. President Vladimir Putin, President Xi Jinping, President Kotma Baltuga, and Prime Minister Inagyon, it is truly a pleasure to be able to meet you here. Let me begin my remarks by extending my sincere thanks to President Putin, who invited us all here. I must say all three addresses thus far were at times truly grand in their mindset and provided various kinds of food for thought. They left a deep impression on me and have prompted me to consider Japan's identity and what kind of country Japan is. What comes to mind is what I call a dot connector. Points unconnected to anything, or human resources, goods, or capital, unconnected to each other. Japan takes those isolated dots and links them, thereby creating added value. On one occasion, it might be the Yama Peninsula and Kamchatka. For instance, these may be 2 points on a plane, or these could be an artificial satellite and someone's house in Siberia in three-dimensional space. What materializes is connectivity, LNG in the first case, and internet access in the second. Across the landscape of Eurasia, across the seascape of the Indo-Pacific where we find Japan, and across outer space and cyberspace under which all of us fall, connectivity is evolving, bringing forth new linkages and new connections. We are living in an age in which added value arises from bringing things together. My hope for Japan in the coming years is for us to be a magnificent dot connector. In this role, we will foster associations between points that have never come together before and link knowledge with other heretofore unconnected knowledge, all on the basis of fair and above-board rules. President Putin, this is precisely why we can look forward to great synergy arising through Japan and Russia cooperating with each other. Later in these remarks, I will emphasize this point. From now, I would like to use the first half of my time to discuss the future. I will focus here only on the future. Next year, you will see in Japan the succession to the imperial throne. You will also see the G20 Osaka summit convene, a meeting to which I will be inviting President Putin and President Xi. After we bid farewell to summer, the curtain will open on the Rugby World Cup. The opening match on September 20 at Tokyo Stadium pits the host nation Japan against an opponent I'd like to introduce to you here, and that is Russia. Let us each put up a good hearty fight. And just after that, the year 2020 is the year of the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games. Young people from all around the world will gather in Tokyo to hold a festival celebrating both sports and peace. Your Excellencies here on the stage and ladies and gentlemen, the audience today, Japan now stands at a historic turning point. Here at this historic juncture, I am determined to build peace and prosperity in the East Asia of the 21st century. First, I will address Japan's relations with China. During my first administration, I visited China immediately after taking office as Prime Minister and put forth the approach of a mutually beneficial relationship based on common strategic interests. China's People's Daily called that visit an ice-breaking trip. However, at the inauguration of my second administration upon becoming Prime Minister again, Japan-China relations were in a state of real difficulty that could even be called the worst relationship we had had since the end of the war. Wanting somehow to improve Japan's ties with China, I have worked hard at this over the years. The reason is that Japan and China share great responsibility for the peace and prosperity of the region and indeed the entire world. The countries of Asia also have expectations for Japan and China to stably develop friendly relations. We will live up to those expectations, develop our cooperative relations across the entire spectrum of fields, and contribute to the peace and prosperity of the region and the world. That is my conviction. The meeting I had with President Xi Jinping at the Da-Nang APEC meeting in November last year was a superb opportunity that became a new start for Japan-China relations. In May this year, Premier Li Keqiang, visiting Japan on the first such visit for a Chinese premier in 8 years, said that Japan-China relations have returned to their normal path, and I agree with him entirely. Earlier today, President Xi and I succeeded in holding highly significant talks regarding Japan-China relations and the various issues that we face together. In response to China's gracious invitation, I intend to visit China this year, the year in which we commemorate the 40th anniversary of the conclusion of the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between Japan and China. After that, I very much wish to invite President Xi to Japan. Through this exchange of visits at the leaders' level, I hope to raise Japan-China relations to a new stage. I am firmly determined in this regard. If we are to make the peace and prosperity of this region in the 21st century something firm, we cannot skirt around North Korean issues. In Singapore in June, a historic summit took place between the United States of America and North Korea. I endorse this summit as a forward-looking step towards the resolution of the abductions, nuclear, and missile issues. While President Donald Trump engaged in confidence building with Chairman Kim Jong-un, he also shared with him the bright future that would emerge through denuclearization and urged Chairman Kim to take action. In so doing, he adopted a new approach that no one else had tried before. Through President Trump's decisive judgment, the relations between North Korea and the international community are now poised to move forward significantly. I very much hope that North Korea seizes this opportunity. My own belief is that no nation is blessed with as much potential as North Korea to change its future into one of hope. North Korea enjoys copper, gold, iron ore, and abundant mineral resources. Its population of 25 million will no doubt become one of the world's leading hardworking labor forces. Today, let all of us gathered here pledge to continue talking to North Korea in a single voice so that it is able to walk the path of a future filled with hope. Let us mutually confirm that we will engage with North Korea with an attitude that does not waver. What should we do to make that a reality? It is an absolute imperative that we achieve the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, whatever it takes. On this point, President Putin, President Xi, and I are all in complete agreement. I have great expectations that the inter-Korean summit that will be held in Pyongyang in the near future will lead to concrete actions towards the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Between Japan and North Korea lies the abductions issue. This too must be resolved. Within that context, I am determined for us to take steps towards settling the unfortunate past with North Korea and normalizing our relations. I, too, must break the shell of mutual distrust, take a step forward, and ultimately meet with Chairman Kim Jong-un. At present, nothing has been decided regarding a Japan-North Korea summit meeting. But if we are going to hold one, then I am resolved it must be a meeting that contributes to the resolution of the abductions issue. What is essential for lasting peace and prosperity in the Northeast Asia region is for the leaders of the region, including the 5 of us who are here today, to take steps all heading towards the same direction. I will spare no efforts towards that end. I make that pledge here today. Next, allow me to address Japan's relations with Russia. For Japan, as we lay the foundation for the peace and prosperity of this region in the 21st century, our relations with Russia hold unlimited potential. Over the long stretch of more than 70 years since the end of World War II, Japan and Russia have yet to conclude a peace treaty between them. President Putin and I agree in our belief that this is an abnormal state of affairs. In December 2016, I welcomed President Putin to my hometown of Nagato. There, the 2 of us discussed in great depth the future of Japan-Russia relations. We decided to launch consultations on the special system for engaging in joint economic activities on the 4 northern islands and pledged to make it possible for former island residents to freely visit grave sites. There in Nagato, we also shared an earnest determination towards resolving the issue of the peace treaty. Ladies and gentlemen, these promises we made in Nagato are now steadily coming to be carried out. Japan-Russia relations are beginning to advance at a degree of acceleration never seen before. The plans for bilateral cooperation that President Putin and I pledged to undertake now number more than 150. Of these, more than half are already actually underway or truly right on the verge of being launched. I have a video for you to see what I have just said. Please take a look.
Проекты достигли значительного прогресса после майской встречи на высшем уровне в этом году.
Борюсь с таким заболеванием, как множественная миелома, поэтому жизнь моя разделена на 2 части: до заболевания и после заболевания. То, что я принимаю это лекарство, это большой шанс для меня и дает мне, я надеюсь, большие перспективы.
Такие направления, как профилактика заболеваний, выявление на ранних стадиях серьезных заболеваний, актуальны, конечно, и для наших граждан.
Прежде всего, в Хабаровске мы настроены на предиктивную медицину, на выявление, для того, чтобы человек не болел, а чувствовал себя комфортно.
В мае 2018 года в городе Владивостоке открывается реабилитационный центр Хоботов.
Во Владивостоке Япония предлагает отраслевые программы в областях транспорта, туризма, жилья и утилизации отходов. Владивосток приятно преобразится.
И получается, все продумано, не нужно делать лишних.
You don't have to take any unnecessary steps. This will save your time, energy. So this is very good. It's very warm and nice and quiet. Japanese technology is great. I like it. This is the first step towards a civilized waste management in our city. It's a serious, big step forward. I can get to my work easier. I can.
Для создания экспортной базы на Дальнем
To
Востоке
create an export base in Vladivostok, the seaport infrastructure is being improved. New Japanese equipment and cranes have been installed. The entire Far East gain access to the internet today using modern technology. Also, mail is being delivered from Japan to Europe via the Trans-Siberian line. Contacts between young people will make an important contribution to developing relations between Russia and Japan. I hope that Japanese companies will start business in Kaluga region as well. For a future of Russia full of smiles.
How does that strike you? You might have noticed a single common thread running through those projects, connecting them all. Bringing the 8-point cooperation plan into realization will enable you to feel, in a tangible way, improvements in Russians' quality of life. Russia and Japan are now about to produce conclusive evidence to the people of Russia and, by extension, to the entire world. It will be evidence that when Russia and Japan join hands, Russian people become healthier. Russian cities become more comfortable. And Russian small and medium-sized enterprises become dramatically more efficient. By cooperating with Japan, Russia's underground resources will reach cities around the globe with even greater efficiency. Through Japan-Russia cooperation here, Vladivostok and locations all around Far East Russia will become gateways where human resources, goods, and capital come together. Japan and Russia are now truly poised to produce tremendous amounts of evidence, and yes, the dream of digital Russia will come to bear fruit even sooner. While the potential Japan and Russia enjoy is found only rarely in other bilateral relations, there is one obstacle that remains even now, hindering this potential from coming into full bloom. And to repeat myself, ladies and gentlemen, that is nothing other than the fact that our two countries have yet to conclude a peace treaty. It was May 25th, earlier this year, at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, that in my remarks I urged the audience to imagine. I called on them to hope and imagine how the world will look when a lasting stability comes to take hold between Japan and Russia. At that time, we will have established a pillar of peace in a major corner of the northern and eastern hemispheres. That will be promising indeed as a substantial pillar that underpins the region and also the world. The Arctic Ocean to the Bering Sea, the North Pacific, and the Sea of Japan will together form a major arterial sea road of peace and prosperity. The islands that used to be a source of conflict will have found bright potential as a logistics hub, transforming into a symbol of Japan-Russia cooperation. The Sea of Japan will also most likely change dramatically as a highway sending goods back and forth, and beyond that is the arrival on the world stage of a huge region brimming with peace, prosperity, and dynamism governed by free and fair rules that connects to China, the Republic of Korea, Mongolia, and the countries of the Indo-Pacific region. President Putin, here, with this sizable audience as our witnesses, let us once again confirm with each other our intention to make this a reality. Let us walk forward together, mindful of the questions: if we don't do it now, then when? And if we do not do it, then who will? We're both fully aware that it will not be easy. However, we have a duty to future generations. We have the duty to completely clear away from Northeast Asia the post-war scenes and change the future to one truly filled with hope. Ladies and gentlemen, no longer can we allow our children to be troubled endlessly under the same standstill in Japan-Russia relations that troubled our generations. Several achievements in the video you just watched are really just like a preview to the great undertakings we will be able to achieve if both our countries put our minds to resolving this issue. Let us make the potential that we hold bloom more fully. The meeting President Putin and I just held was our 22nd. We will keep taking advantage of various opportunities and continue to engage in talks again and again. I urge you all to support our steps towards concluding a peace treaty. I ask for a hearty round of applause from everyone here in support of this. Thank you.
2020年
In 2020, the face of Tokyo will have become entirely renewed for the Olympic and Paralympic Games. Not only will self-driving cars run through the streets, but quite possibly they will also transform into vehicles that fly and take to the skies. In Japan now, the curtain is about to be raised on a new era, thanks to Japan's new generation and thanks also to the people from all around the world that visit Japan. I appeal to young Russians in as loud a voice as I can muster. Come to Japan to live, to learn, and to work, and to help build a new Japan together with the Japanese. The future is another word for hope. Bringing up young people able to have that wholehearted conviction is the weightiest responsibility held by all those leading a nation. I want the young generation about to be born in Japan, hand in hand with the youth of Russia, of China, of the Republic of Korea, and of Mongolia, to bring even greater peace and prosperity to Asia and the world and become the driving force that before long gives rise to an era truly filled with hope. I look forward to this kind of future each and every day without fail. I am prepared to work hard, giving everything I have got in the future as well. I will see you all again. Thank you very much.
Господин Абе, вы...
Mr. Abe,
Вы раскинули такую широкую сеть вопросов.
You have covered a broad range of issues. I don't know where to start. We met in May. I really appreciate that interview that you've given me just before the forum in St. Petersburg. You know what I have paid attention to when we were putting together that material? There were no examples regarding the Kuril Islands. How do you see cooperative economic activities in South Kuril Islands? What can it be? Two years ago, President Putin and I had a meeting at my motherland in Nagato. We had a conversation about it. We said that it's very sad that we still don't have a peace treaty. And we said that we must change the way we approach it so that our peoples should understand the significance of this matter. We must resolve all the problems and sign a peace treaty. Joint economic projects are a good way to achieve that goal. Through cooperative projects, we can understand each other better. We can create good relations. We can become friends. We now have negotiations on the matters of practical application of this idea. It's not just about the people who live on the islands and in Japan. Everybody should understand the need to solve this problem and sign a peace treaty. I believe in that. I am trying to put myself in your place, and I was thinking, okay, 1956, Moscow Declaration, the sign of goodwill, mentioning two islands, possibility of signing a peace treaty. After that, very rapidly the situation started to change, not in the direction of goodwill, and very obviously, deployment of American troops in Japan. I want to ask a question. In your negotiations, have you touched upon this subject? What if in today's Russian South Kuril Islands, which are very significant as a path to the Pacific Ocean, what if American bases are set up there? Is that a subject of negotiations? I must say that Shinzo is right. He and I, we want to reach the point when we can sign a peace treaty. I think it's a very important matter in bilateral relations. It should create favorable conditions for better atmosphere in the world. Chairman Xi talked about it. We should create a favorable atmosphere in the region. I completely agree with that. Japan is our natural partner, and we want our relations to be much better. The issue of security is very significant, and we are discussing this issue. On the positions that you have mentioned, naturally, we are concerned with many aspects of military cooperation in the region, expansion of American ballistic missile defense systems. All of that is subject of our negotiations. I don't want to go into the details. I want to say something that is related to what Shinzo said. He suggested that we should change our approach. Believe it or not, a very simple idea that has occurred to me right now as I speak. 70 years. For 70 years, we've been trying to resolve our disputes. You mentioned the Declaration of 1956. It was not just signed, it was ratified by the Parliament of Japan and by the Supreme Council of the USSR. Then the Japanese side decided not to carry out this document. We're now returning to reviewing this issue. We've been negotiating for 70 years. Shinzo said, let's change the approach. Let's do that. And now on the idea that just occurred to me, let's sign a peace treaty, not now, but before the end of the year, without any preliminary conditions. I wasn't even asking the audience to give me a hand, but thank you for this support. And then, based on that peace treaty, as friends, we can continue to address all our disputes. I think this should make things much easier. It would be easier for us to address all the challenges. 1632, the clock has been set. I think we're going to be coming back to this subject again and again today. But now I would like to pass the floor to Prime Minister of the Republic of Korea, Mr. Lee. Over to you.
존경하는 블라디미르 푸틴 대통령님, 시진핑 주석님, 갈트마 바톨가 대통령님, 아베 신조 총리님, 각국 정부의 대표단과 경제인 여러분, 귀빈 여러분 반갑습니다. 동북아시아 지도자들이 한자리에 모여 극동 개발과
Leaders of countries in Northeast Asia came together to join efforts to secure stability and peace in the region. This is very important. This is the fourth event of this kind, and it's an honor for me to be presenting here. Ladies and gentlemen, Far East for a long time has been the point where Western and Eastern cultures interfaced. Recently, we are looking at the opportunities associated with the Northern Sea route. The potential of the region is being used very extensively through President Putin's policy focusing on active development of the region. The region has been developing faster than many other parts of Russia. The number of investors that do business in 18 priority development area have grown to 210. In 2017. Far East plays a big role in relations between Russia and Republic of Korea. In 2017, the share of Far East accounted for 37% of bilateral trade. Amongst 150 companies operating in Russia, 39 companies do business in this part of Russia. In 2014, we have signed an agreement on cancellation of visa requirements. Vladivostok has become a popular tourist destination for Korean citizens. Eurasian culture, great sites make Vladivostok very popular and very well known in South Korea. In 2017, the number of South Korean citizens has grown twofold compared to 2016, and it amounted to 100,000 people. Far Eastern University plays a big role. This university has hosted a Korea Studies department. It maintains a tradition of Korea studies. The president of South Korea, Moon Jae-in, has represented the new northern policy. Korea wants to become connected to energy and transport lines in Eurasia. This should create a new motive force for the Korean economy. This should secure peace, stability, and prosperity in all of Eurasia. Far East is of great importance for all this. President Moon Jae-in suggested that we should establish 9 bridges for cooperation. 9 bridges means 9 key areas of cooperation: natural gas, railways, shipbuilding, electric grids, creating new jobs, agriculture, fishing, seaports development, and North Sea route development. Over 1 year, the efforts of the government and private sector have shown good progress in all these 9 areas. Today, in my presentation, I would like to give you a short overview of what has been achieved and say what we are planning to do in the future. First of all, shipbuilding, seaports, North Sea route, those are the areas where we can hope to get quick results. In these areas, we can have some success stories, and this should help us to create an atmosphere of trust and enhance our cooperation. Last year, President Putin has participated in the ceremony of launching of Christophe de Margerie tanker, which was built in South Korea. Following that, 5 tankers were commissioned, and now they are moving natural gas from Yamal Peninsula to China. A successful exploration of North Sea route would seriously improve the conditions of LNG transport. It should generally improve logistics in Northeast Asia. We are also promoting the development of Zvezda shipyards. This should be the basis of many future cooperative projects. Korean government has supported a feasibility study for Slavyanka port. We will make steps to do more to cooperate in that area as well. SMEs in Korea have a lot of experience, and they have good opportunities in priority development areas, and they're getting ready to work in 9 priority areas, in 9 new areas. Korea and Russia can cooperate in agriculture and fishing business. We have good traditions. Processing, development of tourism are just new opportunities. 7 companies from South Korea produce about 60 tons of soya and corn. That is GMO-free soybeans. Very popular product. We want this cooperation in agricultural projects to go further. We want to do more in the way of tourism development. That would be good for the future. At a summit in June of this year, we have reached an agreement to continue dialogue on matters related to agriculture. Far East has huge sea resources, so we can do a lot of high added value projects. Building roads, building pipelines, those projects are very desirable for everyone. To implement them, one has to spend a lot of money. It requires a lot of investment and very thorough preparation. Korea and Russia have started cooperation in railways, electricity transmission, and natural gas transmission a long time ago. Unfortunately, we have not made much progress for a number of reasons, one of them being a nuclear program in DPRK. New developments, though, give us new hope. In June of this year, President Moon Jae-in traveled to Russia, and in the course of negotiations, several agreements have been reached. Here at East Economic Forum, we had a session on cooperation between South Korea, North Korea, and Russia. We hope that this was an interesting debate, an interesting expert discussion. We really appreciate the attention that Russian government pays to such trilateral projects. Yesterday, I saw that there's a logistics company that is using Trans-Siberian main line to move cargoes from Vladivostok to St. Petersburg in large containers. President Moon Jae-in on the 15th of August suggested that we should create a new railways community with participation of North Asian countries. With the participation of the United States, this should give a new impetus to the economic development of the region. This should create better peace and stability in the region. Korean government is going to work hard to make this a reality, to create necessary conditions. I encourage leaders of countries in North Asia to make their contribution to this process. 4. Our cooperation in 9 domains should continue, but at the same time, we should look for new areas of cooperation. We have been looking at environmental protection, education, healthcare as new areas for our cooperation. In development of infrastructure, we can also do more. Korea has a great healthcare system and great talents in this area. We have a well-developed system of health insurance. We're using it. We have a great information system supporting the healthcare. High-quality healthcare services would be very beneficial for the Far East. It should help raise investment for this region. Building new infrastructure is another area where Korean businesses can share their best practices. We hope we can do a lot in the way of environmental projects. The opportunities in cooperation between our countries really have no limits. We should use different channels to interact at the level of governments and business communities. Over 1 year, we have already achieved some interesting results. Chairman of the Committee on Cooperation in Northeast Asia and Mr. Trutnev have had a meeting to promote several projects in the Far East. We have set up business councils in both countries. We have special days for Korean investors to raise people's awareness of the opportunities. We are going to have the first regional Russian-Korean forum in the city of Puhan, the home of POSCO company. Russia is going to send representatives of 9 regions, and Korea will have representatives from 17 regions. We hope this will help all those people to network and strengthen cooperation. At the venue of the Eastern Economic Forum, our governments have finalized the plan to promote those 9 bridges, 9 areas of cooperation. We hope this will give birth to much more systemic work in this direction. President Putin, Chairman Xi Jinping, Mr. President Batulga, Mr. Prime Minister Abe, we have had 6-party talks to address North Korean nuclear problem. Many countries have been hoping that those negotiations would be successful. Unfortunately, they have not come to a successful end. However, Korean government expresses appreciation for the contribution that all countries have made to this process. We're looking for a way to settle this problem. We continued looking for a settlement. However, we have taken the situation to the point of crisis. This year, we have seen many changes on Korean Peninsula. There's been 2 summits between the 2 Korean states, and first a summit between North Korea and the United States has also taken place. In several days, they will open the first point of communication between the 2 Korean states. President Moon Jae-in is going to pay a visit to Pyongyang, and that will be the 3rd meeting between the heads of 2 states. We also expect renewal of high-level meetings between North Korea and the United States of America. Such negotiations should help us to reach practical results and achieve denuclearization of Korean Peninsula. The North and the South are traveling along the path that is new to us. We are going towards a new future. We need more wisdom, courage, and patience. Whatever difficulties we face, we are not going to change the direction in which we are moving. Path towards the peace. We do not want to come back to the path of contradictions. Denuclearization of Korean Peninsula would require contribution of the entire international community. We want to get international support. The government of Korea is going to try hard to achieve denuclearization, and we want to get support from leaders of all countries that are interested in achieving that goal. We hope that Korean Peninsula that has been a hot spot for a long time will become an area of peace and prosperity in Northeast Asia. That's the direction in which we want to move. I'm really asking for support and contribution from all leaders of countries in Northeast Asia. These efforts should bring fruit. Only if we create logistics and transport infrastructure, we can establish peace. That is the subject of this forum, expanding the limits and possibilities for the benefit and prosperity of all Northeast Asia. We hope that we will make bridges between the two Korean states. We hope that Russian policy in the region, One Belt, One Road initiative in Japan, and Japanese policies concerning the region would help us achieve our common goal, that is to secure peace, stability, and prosperity in Northeast Asia. This time, I came here by plane. Next time, I want to come here by train, travel to Vladivostok by rail, and I am asking the leaders of the countries in the region to help me make this dream a reality. Thank you.
I promise you, in a couple of minutes, we'll go back to the Far Eastern topics. But as the European part of Russia is waking up, it's 10 a.m. there, I have to go back and I have to ask a question. As a journalist, I must ask this. In the last 3 or 4 days, there were at least a couple of theories about those 2 young people who went to the UK. Maybe they posed for photographs, those guys who, or maybe they were not professional, very unprofessional. Maybe there's a third theory.
Well, we did take a picture at what these people are. We know who they are. We found them. I hope that they will turn up themselves and will tell everyone about themselves. There is nothing special, nothing criminal there, you know, I assure you. We'll see in the nearest future. Are they civilians? Are they civilians? Yes, they are civilians.
Okay, so we'll keep waiting.
I want to address them, actually, for them to hear us today. Let them come here, to you, to the media, possibly.
They should come to my office on Saturday. How about that? Mr. Putin, maybe you could keep your earpiece on because it will be easier for you to hear me this way. Let's go back to Korea and let's think about the day after tomorrow. Let's say North Korea says, We keep talking about North Korea. All the speakers mentioned North Korea and the development of the Far Eastern territories. A lot depends on North Korea. So let's say day after tomorrow, North Korea agrees to abandon missiles and nuclear weapons. Of course, they will require guarantees that their country will not be attacked. What kind of guarantees we might have? For example, Japan has this nuclear umbrella by the United States. What about North Korea? Can it have a nuclear umbrella? Who should provide it with such an umbrella? Is it the People's Republic of China or the Russian Federation? I'm asking the leaders of nuclear powers right now. Maybe President Xi could take this question. You're right. The problem of the Korean Peninsula, like I said earlier, this is an issue in which all of our countries are involved. We are facing a number of factors here. We've seen recently political consultations have gone back to the old track. And right now we are faced with a situation where things are improving, and it was not easy for us to get to this point. All the parties involved, all the nations have to appreciate this. The Korean nuclear problem has been in existence for decades. And now we have a window of opportunity. We have to treasure this. We have to be confident. Without such confidence, it would be impossible for us to make progress on this issue. So it's really important. Confidence is really important. Second, patience. Such a long-term problem cannot be resolved overnight. You cannot resolve it in one round of consultations. I see that all the parties are getting more rational now. Talks continue, and this is really important. We see positive trends in talks. Contacts between Pyongyang and Washington continue. North Korea and South Korea continue talking to each other, and soon there will be a new meeting between the leaders of North Korea and South Korea. China, too, keeps talking to North Korea. We promote denuclearization. We continue our interaction on this track. Prime Minister Abe and I discussed this issue earlier today. We all continue active consultations on this issue. We are all looking for a political settlement on this issue. It's important for us to be patient and determined. China and Russia have come up with a roadmap. On the one hand, we promote denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. At the same time, we need to offer safeguards for preserving peace on the peninsula. I think one nation cannot offer such guarantees. It will require efforts by the international community. We can do our part, and Russia is also willing to do its part. So we will contribute but we will also require guarantees by the entire international community. Of course, key players on this issue are the countries that are directly involved in this matter. I'm referring, of course, to North Korea, South Korea, and the United States. You know, we always say if you tie the knot, it's up to you to break it. So we are willing to help to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula and promote peace. And I strongly believe that our joint efforts will eventually help us achieve this goal. Thank you. Mr. Putin, China has provided North Korea with a plane and maybe even a nuclear umbrella. Are you ready to give nuclear umbrella?
China has a nuclear umbrella. China feels very confident in this regard. Still, I fully agree with what President Xi has just said. I also agree with what Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has said. Indeed, President Trump has showed innovative approach in interaction with North Korea. I agree with that. This is also courage, and it shows also innovative approach. However, North Korea, in response to their efforts on denuclearization, received a promise of security guarantees, what you have just said. North Korea has taken some steps to denuclearize. They blew up their testing range. They demolished that. But I believe they expect at least some signals in return. I believe this is counterproductive when North Korea is demanded to do everything, to go all the way, and the counterpart will do nothing. And the North Korea can only believe the word given to her, that it will be all good. What are the guarantees that can be provided? International guarantees. We have six-party talks. We have such a format, and international community can provide such safeguards. Also ensuring the guarantees by the presence of the nuclear powers in the negotiations. Russia is party to such negotiations. If North Korea is satisfied with the U.S. guarantees only, we'll be happy about it. But I do not think that will happen. We all have to be realistic. I believe that international guarantees, in this sense, will be more adequate, and we can talk about it.
We had six-party talks on Iran, and we know what President Trump thinks about that. The fact that there was this meeting with the Kim Jong-un, is there a risk if the United States starts talking directly to North Korea, it may end up the same way as it did with Iran, and then eventually everything collapsed there?
You know, the thing is that mainly Americans and Iranians agreed on that agreement. We only stewarded and supported that process. Well, if I take you behind the scenes here, you know. The basis was their agreement. There is always such a danger. But that does not mean that we should sit idly and not move forward.
I have a story I'd like to tell all of you about a place none of you has ever been. Inside the DMZ, between North Korea and South Korea, there is a pavilion. It's not for peace talks, it's the place where they signed the armistice ceasefire agreement. And when you go there, you can see the flag of the enemy, that the enemy left there. I'm just quoting from a North Korean guide. And this is the flag of the United Nations, because that is the flag that those forces fought under. Actually, if you look at the makeup of UN forces there, they were Ethiopian soldiers there, Colombian soldiers there, I'm mentioning just some of the nations. So we don't really know who should sign the peace treaty. I have a question for Prime Minister Lee. The fact that it was UN forces, they had the UN flag, and actually those are American troops. that are deployed there. Does this affect your talks with the North? For example, you make an agreement with the North to build a railroad. Will you be free? Will it be up to you, Koreans, to make an agreement on how you are going to cross the border, or this buffer, the United States will dictate to you what you can do and what you can't? Like the build railroad is okay, but the pipeline will not be okay, or vice versa.
예, 우선 철도 문제는
First of all, I'd like to tell you that a railroad cooperation is currently at a stage where we study this matter on both sides. According to the procedure, the UN leadership is involved in this process, yet this is not an obstacle, because both North Korea and South Korea are UN members. They joined the United Nations simultaneously. So let's say if and when the peace treaty between North and South is signed, will the UN buffer zone remain along the DMZ line?
그것은 앞으로의 협의가 어떻게 될 것이냐의 문제일 것입니다만.
I think this question will be discussed in the future. It's subject to further discussion. Of course, the UN force is a peacekeeping force. I don't think this instrument will be used going forward. I don't know if you're asking about U.S. troops in South Korea. This is a matter of a military alliance between the United States and the Republic of Korea. North Korea has not raised this issue so far, but you mentioned the subject of an agreement between North Korea and South Korea. I would like to explain that you have two signs on your lapel. One of them is the sign of solidarity with the people who were abducted in North Korea. Let's talk about security guarantees. If North Korea gives up its missiles for economic prosperity, who should offer those guarantees and what those guarantees should be?
これはすでに国連決議にあるわけでありますが。
This question was presented in the UN Security Council resolution. We have 5 leaders present here. And I think we all agree that North Korea should give up weapons of mass destruction, and we need complete, irreversible, and verifiable abandoning of nuclear weapons. This is our joint goal. President Putin came up with an innovative idea just a minute ago. He talked about, it was somewhat skeptical. For a long time, the United States did not even consider having a summit, but President Trump took this risk and demonstrated that as long as North Korea does the right thing, this country will have a great future. This is the principle. We need complete, irreversible, and verifiable abandonment of nuclear weapons. This will allow to lift the sanctions, but we're not there yet. Our former Prime Minister Koizumi had a meeting with Kim Jong-un, and both leaders have adopted the Pyongyang Declaration, which said that the matter of kidnapping Japanese citizens And the missile problem should be resolved, and we need to sign an agreement on normalizing diplomatic relations between our countries. We have the main treaty with the fundamental treaty between Japan and South Korea. And Japan offered economic aid to South Korea after signing this treaty. Now we are ready to offer similar assistance to North Korea.
I was not skeptic about the actions of President Trump. I was not ironic about that. I indeed believe that President Trump showed political courage and he was bold in his actions. But if North Korea is doing something to denuclearize, it expects something in return and not just issues of full denuclearization and without solving the issue of providing guarantees. This is just logic.
Ms.
Matvienko went to Pyongyang recently and gave your personal message to Kim Chen-in. Are we waiting for him here?
Well, we have invited him here, so anytime he can come.
All right. Let's switch to another subject for now. I think we're clear about Korea. Mr. Abe is sitting next to me, and I would like to ask this question. We have lots of examples from business, and to us, taxpayers, we would like to see something we can see, like the bridge between Sakhalin and Hokkaido. How realistic are such projects? Well, as regards this idea, first of all, I would like to tell you about our ties between Japan and Vladivostok. 100 years ago, Vladivostok was connected via the Trans-Siberian Railroad, and this opened the shortest way for the people of Japan to travel to Europe. The Japanese started traveling through Vladivostok. Currently, Vladivostok is the gateway to Asia Pacific. So Vladivostok is the gateway, and Russia is both a European and Asian country. Japan strengthened its relations with Russia, and this will eventually bring Japan together with Europe from the Sea of Japan and East China Sea. In this way, this great space of Southeast Asia will be joined. As regards the project you mentioned, connecting, building a railway between Russian mainland and the island of Sakhalin, which can be extended further to Japan. This requires, first of all, that experts study this project, prepare a feasibility study on this project. Now, as regards the Trans-Siberian Railroad, we know that President Putin actively promotes this idea to boost the capacities of the Trans-Siberian Railway. Now, as regards our relations with Russia, starting last month, we started delivering the mail from 13 European countries through the Trans-Siberian Railway, and the tariffs are the same. The delivery time is now half of what it used to be. So step by step, we should promote our joint projects. Thank you. You've been telling us about your desire to export Mongolian coal to Japan and other countries through Russia. Do you need bridges like that?
Mongolos бол
Mongolia has lots of resources, natural resources, but we don't have access to the sea. And like I said in my speech, our key partners are China. We would like to work with Japan and Korea through Russia. We've signed an agreement for a 25-year period of coal exports to other countries at a reduced price. And I think that the population in our region will increase dramatically by 2030. Energy consumption will also increase. We want to abandon coal power plants and maybe build nuclear power plants instead. At the same time, we also promote the idea of building what we call the supergrid for this entire region. And the railroad will really help us with getting access to the sea. This idea came from China, one belt, one road, so we're coming back to this idea. The projects you just mentioned, are they in line with what you're suggesting? And do you think this has much in common with Eurosec? What does this mean on a practical level? You're right. One Belt, One Road is a very popular name. 5 years ago, I came up with this initiative, One Belt. I was speaking at Nazarbayev University, and One Road, I first came up with this idea when I was in Indonesia. This is based on China's history. When we had the era of prosperity and Western and Oriental civilization were well connected, given this harmony, we think we can have something similar today. We can have the same age of prosperity with the long-term peace, harmony. That's where this idea came from. Later on, this initiative was well received by all the parties. And now it is beyond this historical context, and more countries are now interested in this project. A couple of years ago, we organized the One Belt, One Road Forum, and next year we'll have another forum like that in China. This will take place in Beijing next spring. In the course of these 5 years, the countries that are located along this road, our trade with those countries is over $5 trillion. This is a real result. Our investment in other countries amount to $60 billion. What we did for those countries, we built about 200,000 new jobs. And we had the African-Asian Cooperation Summit in Beijing. Almost all the countries on this continent attended. All those African countries that we have diplomatic ties with attended this forum in Beijing, and we signed the final document with them on the One Belt, One Road initiative. We also signed a number of bilateral documents. These are all results of our cooperation. Now, as regards our cooperation with Russia and Japan as part of the One Belt, One Road project, it is also being harmonized with the EU, with Mongolia. We're working on all this. And our cooperation has been quite successful. We can see some results even now. We prepared even more ambitious programs for the future. We have a number of important projects coming up. We came up with a number of specific proposals as part of this initiative. For example, increasing transport connectivity. This is a very important area. Of course, this will require a lot of funds. This will also require a lot of research. One more point. As far as cooperation is concerned, we need to exchange data, we need funding, and we need humanitarian content. We need to bring our nations closer together. So One Belt, One Road is not just some projects for cooperation. This is a universal idea that covers everything. So I strongly believe that working together with Russia, Mongolia, and other countries in Northeast Asia will promote this work successfully as part of this initiative, and our cooperation will develop further. Thank you.
Где один пояс, один путь, там и расчеты.
One Belt, One Road means transactions. You mentioned US dollars. Let's go back. You took a walk with President Putin, and I think, I couldn't hear it well, but I think you were talking about payments in rubles or renminbi. I think, what was it, honey you were buying? Yes, it was honey. Okay, so I couldn't hear well, so I think somebody paid in rubles. And what was the exchange rate you used? Okay, of course, I'm joking. But I want to ask you about something serious. I want to ask you about payments in national currencies. Last week, we had the financial forum in Moscow, and Mr. Kudrin, who spoke there, was quite skeptical about it because he said that would be an additional burden for businesses, at least for now, using national currency. How realistic is this?
Well, if you allow, I can say a few words about infrastructure. This is a very important issue. First, we fully back President Xi's words about bringing together, coupling the idea of developing infrastructure and cooperation within the One Belt, One Road initiative, as well as bringing together our integrational projects within Eurasian Economic Union. In this union, we're already negotiating with some countries in the region. In Asia, with Vietnam, we have already signed an agreement. We're working with Singapore. With China, we have signed an agreement on cooperation. It's a non-preferential regime, but we're talking about customs procedures, protection of intellectual property, working in e-trade, and all that is moving on, moving forward. Yesterday, we had the latest example. We signed an agreement on working of the famous company Alibaba with Mail.ru, of our Mail.ru group, with Megaphone, with the Russian Direct Investment Fund. We expect it to be a serious contribution to the development of e-trade. This is also bringing together the project promoted by China, One Belt, One Road, and our efforts in Eurasian Economic Union, in this regard in electronic trade. As for infrastructure, this is no less important for us. I have mentioned it multiple times, and I have already mentioned development of Trans-Siberian and Baikal-Amur Railroad. In order to modernize it, we will do that, but we have to think whether we have to build tunnels, for example, the Severmorsky Tunnel, for example. Do we have to? Probably yes. This will tap into our potential on moving cargo, but this cannot be just coal. Maybe if coal gets a setback in the world, in the market, we have to guarantee container cargo flow. We have to work with China, with Japan, then with South Korea, with Mongolia as well. You have asked about a bridge to Sakhalin. Yes, this would broaden our potential for the ports of Sakhalin, but we need to understand the volume of the cargo flow. In this regard, we indeed need crucially cooperation with other countries in the region. And on that depends our economic decision on how to build our infrastructure. These are not just vain discussions. But you were talking about national currencies. Yes, national currencies. Yes, all experts understand that we have to move consistently, and we'll move step by step. Right now, yuan, ruble are traded on Moscow Stock Exchange. Some goods are traded predominantly in dollars, especially hydrocarbons, oil and gas. As for transactions with CIS countries in Eurasian Economic Union, ruble is actively traded, actually. As for export revenue, I think it's about 71% and 79% of import is actually in rubles. Considering the challenges that we have in transaction in dollars, more and more countries do wish to trade in national currencies. Yes, there are limitations, and what was said before, that has to do primarily with trading in oil and gas, in petrochemicals. But developing this bilateral trade in national currencies would be just and justified. And this is justified considering sustainability of the global finance and global economy. And we'll move on forward with that.
But does Russia's central bank have this assignment to sign agreements with other countries' central banks to switch to trading in national currencies?
This is not a political task. This is an economical task.
I would ask Japanese Prime Minister, the President of Mongolia, and the Prime Minister of Korea to comment on this issue. What do you think about trading in national currencies? Mr. Abe, let's start with you.
通貨についてはその為替の問題があるわけでありまして、どの国もですね、為替の変動によってさまざまなリスクを抱えているわけであってですね。
All the countries face this risk. However, if you switch to national currencies, transactions in national currencies, you will be able to avoid this risk. In Japan, national trade is done in dollars. In some cases, we use the Japanese currency, but this is not a political issue. We have to consider economic factors, whether it's profitable. Now, as regards volatility with the exchange rate, we should pursue an appropriate policy by the central bank.
Well, we can also have transactions in tugrix, for example, but this is not about the exchange rate differences, but we have to decide this issue at the level of central banks. These are all mechanisms that can be corrected. There are always risks. Are there no risks in transactions in dollars? $23 trillion is government debt in U.S., and this is also a burden. What is going to happen in the future? We do not have an answer. There are always risks, and we have to minimize them. And in order to do that, what do we need to do? To diversify our transactions and activities. For example, our gold reserves, we have diversified them. And the same goes to the public debt of the Russian Federation. It is nominated not only in the US dollars, but in other currencies as well. This is all very important. Overall, that creates the stability of our financial system, as well as the global financial system, I believe.
All right, I would now ask the President of Mongolia to say something. As far as Mongolia is concerned, the central bank of our country has signed an agreement with the Central Bank of China. We're now in talks with the Central Bank of Russia as well. Of course, there are certain risks involved. Our priority is to sign such a swap agreement with our neighbors, and we can also develop trade with Japan in yen. Some of our projects are done. We pay by offering mineral resources from our country. There is a lot of volatility around the world, all sorts of unstable situations, and we have to consider whether this or that currency can be used to address such changes in the environment. I have a lot of colleagues here in this room, colleagues of mine, people who can explain everything but don't want to do so. But we've been working for 2.5 hours, and I would like to ask all of you in conclusion to comment on the following issue. Take any issue in Asia, things we discussed today, but we always talk about the past. It was worse or it was better. We have the country, the superpower that is about to withdraw from the WTO, and the Trans-Pacific partnership failed. But with all of our countries, except for Mongolia maybe, there are some territorial disputes. There are questions that Japan has for Russia. There are certain discussions between Japan and China, maybe Korea too. Maybe we could achieve a new level in our region, in politics and in the economy, if we could maybe forget about ourselves for a minute or come to some kind of consensus on territorial disputes. There used to be a situation like that in Europe. They had similar disputes. So maybe this is the litmus test. Maybe this is a springboard that will take us to a new reality. I would ask all of you to say a few words about this issue, whoever wants to go first, because I'm even afraid to nominate the candidate. Maybe we start with Prime Minister Abe, because he raised this subject first in our meeting today.
我々はこの北東アジアの国でありますが、同時に国境を接している国々。
We are all located in Northeast Asia. We don't have a border with Mongolia, but we do have a common border with Russia, North Korea, and China. Of course, neighbors should be friends. Neighbors should cooperate. Since we are neighbors, this is why we have other issues. But Since we are neighbors, when you don't have a common border, you don't have that many problems. But since we do have common borders, that's where problems come from, including territorial disputes. What matters, though, is that the leaders of countries handle these issues without nationalism.
マネージしていくことが大切であろうと思います。同時にですね、先ほど日露についてはその問題を解決をしていくという。
Japan and Russia do agree, and both President Putin and myself are determined to resolve our territorial disputes. This would require that we meet more often and find common ground. It is because we have these problems that we can see each other more often and deal with these issues together. We can discuss ways to resolve these issues. As by developing exchanges between our nations, we can remove this kind of negative feeling towards each other. So what this means on a practical level, Prime Minister Abe, you are the only person here who would require a visa to travel to Russia. Talking about exchanges, right? All the others are free to travel here anytime they want. Let's start with the other flank. Let's now turn to Korea. What do you think about territorial disputes? Maybe resolving those disputes would bring us greater prosperity. Right. Territorial disputes have long history. And there are international rules and criteria for such disputes. So I think we should resolve such disputes wisely based on such documents. Deng Xiaoping, the leader of China, said once that if this generation is not wise enough to resolve this matter, it is up to the next generation to get it resolved, even if it takes time. Still, I think we need to be wise. President Padalga, don't misunderstand me, but you are very fortunate, so we can skip over you. Or do you want to say something? You don't have territorial, although you did have some territorial disputes in the past. Well, I wouldn't call us fortunate. It's just because we were able to. We joined the United Nations, and it was in the United Nations that we were able to do that. We used to have territorial disputes with China, but we signed an agreement with China. That's why we don't have any territorial disputes with our neighbors. So in Russian, you might say, we were not fortunate. It's because of our smart policies. Our diplomats did great job. Yes, we can share our experience with you. Maybe you could take this question now, and then I will turn to the president of my country. Do you think that our countries can achieve greater prosperity if they resolve those issues? Indeed. If there are territorial disputes, they do create problems. Territorial disputes are hard to resolve. You cannot resolve them even here in this room, but if you can't resolve a problem, at least you need to control it. And I'm not only talking about territorial disputes here. If such problems result in a war, this is not a wise choice. So you need to control such matters. You need to find common ground. there is a Chinese saying, you need to maintain unity while preserving diversity. So I think we have to learn the lessons of history. I genuinely think and I genuinely hope that the countries facing such problems would resolve them in a proper way. And there are different examples of that. I will ask one more question later, but now, Mr. Putin, to you.
Well, right now, President of Mongolia said that they also had some issues, including China, some territorial disputes, but they managed to agree. But the same happened with us. It may seem strange, but we did have territorial disputes with People's Republic of China. We conducted negotiations about this issue for 40 years. Still, we managed to find an acceptable compromise, and we solved this issue. Moreover, I can tell you, right now, our businesses and Chinese businesses are coming up with suggestions to jointly use these islands fully. You mean Neo-Khabarovsk? Yes, yes. They just suggest to be more active in infrastructural activities and tourist activities. You mean those islands that go back and forth? Yes. We did not cross this issue off our table, but and I believe that it is forever. But we actually have suggestions to have joint work there. Indeed, I hope that we'll manage to cover other issues and solve them, including Japan. It was no joke when I said that in order to sign a peace treaty with no prerequisites, we can actually sign it with a clause that we can solve other issues in the future, and we can cross everything off the list when we have some hurdles in our relations. With Prime Minister Abe, we have agreed to organize our joint economic work in the islands. We need to create an environment where it would be easier to solve these issues. I believe they do not have this fundamental nature of great significance for economy, for example, for us. Look at the map of the Russian Federation. This is a large country, the largest in the world. And these islands, this is more of an ethical and political nature, but they are very sensitive for our nations. Considering this, we need to be very cautious in our approaches to solve these issues, but we'll strive for that in order to improve the situation, to solve all these issues. We want to solve them, and I hope that we'll do that sometime.
Mr. Putin, you mentioned having an environment, so my last question, of course, it's probably not something that the president should get involved in, talking about visas, but this is something you mentioned just a couple of days ago. Nothing terrible happened during the World Cup when Russia offered visa-free travel for football fans. How about we continue with this practice? Let me mention just one technical issue to you. It's interesting. If you look at APEC countries, we have agreements with all Latin American countries except for Mexico, even though Mexican fans were quite prominent. But Russians can go to Mexico, they can get e-visas, and Mexicans are only free to travel to Russia during the World Cup. But maybe we could reconsider our position on visa regulations. Even many of your friends face difficulties with getting a Russian visa. It's too complicated.
I'm all for it. Lavrov is against it. He's sitting here, and I have to listen to the specialist's opinion. As officers of the foreign ministry tell me, these issues are mainly solved through reciprocity. right now, this is the situation that we have. Still, we will try to dismantle all visa barriers. Well, if Shinzo has to get a visa, we'll give him a 5 or 10-year visa, you know. You know, we achieved something.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all those who watched us, who listened to us. Thank you to our panelists. I think this Eastern Economic Forum can be described as a prototype of future regular summits in Northeast Asia. We have never had so many states represented here on stage. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Спасибо вам.